let's get to some headlines from across the state of Texas in the high school football ranks. And we must start with, I think, the biggest story across Texas high school football this weekend, which was the passing of a true Texas high school football legend. Kenneth Hall has passed away, according to the first reported by the Houston Chronicle. Kenneth Hall was 89 years old. Ken Hall, known as the Sugarland Express, is, in all seriousness, perhaps the most iconic Texas high school football player of all time. He is someone who is obviously before my time. He played in the 1950s. But there are a few names in Texas high school football that have resonated throughout the years that you just remember their name, even though you never saw them. That they're true legends of the game, true icons of the game, and Ken Hall is on that short list. Ken Hall played for Sugarland, the Gators, back from 1950 to 1953. Sugarland, by the way, merged with another school and became, I think it merged with Missouri City High School and became Fort Bend Dulles. That's what the school is now. But from 1950 to 1953, Ken Hall put together what can only be described as perhaps the finest high school football career in Texas history, and perhaps the finest high school football career in national history. He ran for 11,232 yards in his career. 11,232 yards. Setting the national rushing record. He set that record. Obviously, he graduated in 1953, was his final season. That record stood until 2012. Okay? 1953 to 2012. That national record stood for nearly 60 years.
Wow.
Right? If I'm doing my math right. Yeah. 1953, 47, plus 12. Yeah.
Math is hard.
Nearly 60 years. Until it was broken by a name you've probably heard of. Derrick Henry is who broke that record. When he was playing in Florida, he went on to win the Heisman Trophy, who went on to be an NFL All-Pro. He is, by the way, still 70-plus years later, the state's all-time leading rusher at 11,232 yards.
Wow.
So he's the only rusher to ever run for 11,000 yards. There's only two players in Texas high school football history besides Ken Hall who have run for 10,000 yards. Okay? Traylon Shedd and Jonathan Gray. And those are guys who are also kind of talked about in hushed tones. Ken Hall, there's a real argument to being the GOAT. Okay? Furthermore, in 1953, Ken Hall put together one of the finest seasons in Texas high school football history, in which he ran for 4,045 yards, in leading the Gators to a third consecutive Class B regional title, which was at that time that's as far as you could go, was win your regional title. And perhaps most remarkably of that is that he ran, that's still, by the way, the single season state rushing record, 4,045 yards. He accomplished that in 12 games. Okay? So I want you to think about that. We now have unbelievable players who have as many as 16 games, 4 more games, and nobody's beaten his record in 70 years. He averaged 337 yards a game as a senior. Absolutely outrageous.
Jeez.
Including in 1953, he ran for 520 yards against Houston Lutheran. That is still, by the way, like the 11th highest rushing total in a season or in a game 70 years later. And by the way, he returned a kickoff for a touchdown, a punt for a touchdown, and he had an interception in that game too. He's one of the greatest players in Texas high school football history. His story is kind of interesting. He was recruited very heavily, obviously. He went to go play he signed to play, or I don't know if he even signed at that point. He went to go play for Bear Bryant at Texas A&M. But he never played for the Aggies. Before they all went to Junction, if you want to remember the Junction boys, He was going to be one of them. He ended up stepping away from football and went and got married. He lived out the rest of his days in Fredericksburg. He was a guy who you could just see around Fredericksburg, just being Ken Hall. He's in the Texas High School Football Hall of Fame, the National High School Sports Hall of Fame, and the Texas Sports Hall of Fame. He's the Hall Trophy, which is the most outstanding player at the All-American game, is named after him. He did play in the NFL and the CFL for 34 games as well, but his legacy is in Texas high school football. His legacy is in being arguably the most iconic player in Texas high school football history. Ken Hall is in many ways peerless. And I mentioned this on Twitter that I do think that someday his career rushing record's going to fall. 11,213 yards. Like I said, two guys have come close in Traylon Shedd and in Jonathan Gray. They came kind of close. And I think at some point you're going to have some workhorse running back who leads his team on 4 consecutive deep playoff runs, and just by a sheer number of games, he's going to be able to catch Ken Hall. I think there's a chance that that gut caught. I don't think we'll ever see a 4,000-yard rusher in Texas high school football again. It's astonishing stuff. Like to put it in perspective. Let me see if I can find out who the leading rusher in Texas high school football this year was. I should have this somewhere. You are listening to live coverage of me looking this up. So the leading rusher in Texas high school football this year was John Hebert, the outstanding running back at Houston Straight Jesuit, and he was a workhorse. He carried the ball 378 times for Straight Jesuit, and he had 3,500 yards.
Oh, okay.
So 500 more yards, and he would have still, I believe, been behind Ken Hall. The Sugar Land Express, Ken Hall, was 89 years old and a Texas high school football icon. Elsewhere across the state of Texas, let's get some other coaching changes. One of them came down last week, written about on TexasFootball.com by our own Matt Stepp. Lockhart has come open. Todd Mabus has stepped down as the head coach at Lockhart. Not to give too much away, but I think that there's a chance that he's going somewhere else. I don't think this is a retirement. I think this is a stepping down and maybe heading somewhere else. But Todd Mabus was there for 7 years there as the head coach there at Lockhart. I joked on Twitter that I have a feeling Lockhart, Texas, the barbecue capital of Texas, will not have a problem getting applicants for this job. Some fringe benefits there is what I'm saying. But keep an eye on that one. Lockhart is now open as Todd Mabus has stepped down after 7 years at the helm of the Lions. Elsewhere, this came down early last week as my computer is freezing up. Things are going great. Burleson Centennial has hired a coach. You may remember that we were keeping an eye on this one after last week, or after it came open. They have after a lengthy search, they have promoted from within their defensive coordinator, Blake Meyer. Blake Meyer has been an assistant coach for Kyle Geller for the last 15 seasons since the beginning of the program. This is a guy who knows this program inside and out. They will promote their defensive coordinator, Blake Meyer, to be the next head coach of the Burleson Centennial. So keep an eye on that. Blake Meyer, the new head coach there at Burleson Centennial. And finally, I want to make sure we bring this up because this was, as my computer continues to freeze up, a really interesting situation developing at Clear Falls, specifically with their quarterback, Kaiden Barker. Now, Kaiden Barker is a name to know from a prospect perspective, a guy that is, I believe, a DCT, a 4-star on TexasFootball.com, and he started his career at Clear Falls. For the past 2 seasons, as my computer is finally now working, for the last 2 seasons, Kaiden Barker has played at Galveston Ball. He transferred to Galveston Ball as a sophomore and a junior. This was reported by our Greg Powers on TexasFootball.com. He is heading back to Clear Falls. now. He is going to be heading back to Clear Falls there as the 3-star quarterback, I should say, heading back to District 24 6A to take over there at Clear Falls. He's already got offers from places like North Texas, Sam Houston, UTEP, and Texas State. He led Galveston Ball to a breakout season at 9-3 last season, threw for 2,500 yards. This is a guy who is a game changer, I think, and could really impact what Clear Falls looks like, and as a result, District 24 6A. So keep an eye on that. Kaiden Barker heading back to Clear Falls to play where he started his career as a freshman. So keep an eye on that. That is all the news that's fit to print around here. You can find everything you need for football across the state of Texas at texasfootball.com. We are Texas Football Today. We are here Mondays and Thursdays on texasfootball.com, talking football in the Lone Star State. You can follow us on Twitter at DCTF, like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Dave Campbells. Follow us on Instagram, instagram.com/Dave Campbells, and of course, see us at texasfootball.com.